I think pictures tell a story. When you see something, it's the same way music creates an emotion. Music can create joy, or it can create a sadness. And I think when people see pictures, and also when they hear the heart of whoever the visionary person is, that tells the story. And it's far better than in the old days when we used to write letters.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, it's very interesting for me. I'm 66. So many young people have said to me, we don't read newsletters anymore.
Right.
Because I've struggled a bit. Like I write these newsletters and I don't get a response from the people who've served there. And then one honest young German man said, "Hey, Uncle Rolf, we don't really read newsletters anymore. You must just make a little TikTok video or something."
Yeah.
Welcome to the 5-9 Creative Podcast. I'm Jeff. Every story has the power to change the way we see the world, and sometimes even the way we see God at work in the world. Through our travels, ministry partners, and storytelling projects, we've had the opportunity to witness incredible things, and this podcast is where we unpack those experiences and the lessons we've learned along the way.
Welcome. We are here with Rolf Weichardt, my friend who is from South Africa, and we are going to be talking about his ministry today, Khanyisa, and it's a really interesting ministry that they do. They've been involved in music and after-school programs and all kinds of stuff over the years, and so we're excited to talk to him today. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Khanyisa and how it got started.
So Khanyisa started in 1991. It was still during apartheid South Africa. And we had a dream to work cross-culturally. We had a dream to see people from different culture and ethnic groups come to know each other through a relationship with Jesus Christ. So we had a slogan in the day that said, we're catalysts for change. And we used the creative arts. So it was a band when we initially started. And for approximately 12 years, we worked in South African high schools. We traveled a bit abroad, but primarily with the message of racial reconciliation through the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Tell me a little bit about kind of how that has shifted, and now what are you doing through Khanyisa?
So when the band ended because of marriages and kids, we moved to a rural community an hour and a half outside of Cape Town. And we have a passion to reach historically disadvantaged youth, kids that have been affected by poverty, kids who are literally disadvantaged because of a system that treated them as less than. And it's actually a very simple model. We love the kids and we build relationships with the kids. We obviously do Bible studies. We tell them about the Lord. They know we're Christians, but we're just wanting them to know that they are loved and cared for. And so we work under the banner, Restoring Dignity.
Tell me a little bit about what the kids in your community face, like different hardships and stuff like that, and why that restoring that dignity is so important.
Well, I'll maybe just go one step back. When we moved to Robertson, it was winter in South Africa, and I was taking our youngest kid to school. A little school bus was fetching him, and I saw these kids walking in the dark, literally in the dark, in the rain. And I stopped these kids, and it was early in the morning. It was like something to 7 o'clock in the morning. And I asked them why they were walking so early, and they said, well, it takes an hour and a half to get to school. And that really troubled me. And I thought, like, how is it possible that these kids have to walk an hour and a half to school, and the people closest to them, or the farm owners closest to them, aren't providing transport? So that's really how we got our connection with the kids. I took a couple of kids in the car, drove to their school, and just realized that these kids are really like the least cared for in the broader South African community. It's like they're rural kids. There's not a great lot of government support. Their schools are very impoverished. They don't have parents who care for them. There aren't good role models for them. So typically, a kid growing up in our community would definitely be exposed to gender violence. I don't know the actual statistic for our community, but in Southern Africa, 70% of kids never even know their biological father. So They could be living in small houses where there could very easily be 2 or 3 men living in the house, and who knows who's the father of this particular kid. So their circumstances are very dismal. Um, there is physical abuse. There's obviously emotional abuse, and we try hard to help these kids understand that they have value, that they're not a mistake, that God loves them completely. And we really can see how it works because, um, and I don't say this with any pride or with any, patting ourselves on the back, but in the community, if we drive through the community, or the students who serve in our community, literally every kid that you pass waves and calls you by name, because they feel we possibly the only people, except maybe school teachers, but people who really care for them, and they know, and it's tangible. So we in South Africa, we allow to touch and hug, and it's we often say to the students, you may not be good at giving a grand Bible study, or you may not feel you're an eloquent speaker, but all you need to do is love these kids, and they'll be eating out of your hand.
So, what made you realize that this wasn't going to just be a short-term little project?
That's a very good question. I think, Katie, from my early conversion days, I just had a heart for people in society that are broken and marginalized. So I always say Isaiah 61 is big in my life, to bind up the brokenhearted, to set captives free. And in South Africa, with our history of racial oppression, there still are generations of young people who always see themselves as less than and not as equal to white people. And that obviously is a tragedy. And so by the time we arrived in Robertson, where we live, I knew that this is what I'd already been doing it for many, many years. And I knew that I'd always have a heart to reach out to the brokenhearted.
Yeah. And, we got to travel, and we got to travel with you like 15 years ago and do a camp with you. Back then, that's when we first met. And then my sister Cameron and I got to come and visit you this past year and film with you. And we got to see some of that ministry stuff going on firsthand. And one thing about just you and your ministry in general that I've just always noticed over the years is you just are a very consistent spirit. You're a consistent source of truth in my life. You're very consistent and stable, a very stable presence for people in your life. And so why is that stability and consistency, why is that important in what you do?
So it's a very good question, because at one point we had challenges with living on the farm where we stayed before, where we are now, and we were looking at other properties in a 50-kilometer radius. But the thing that was most troublesome was that I felt like we'd already started in this community, and if there's something these kids need to see, it's consistency. And so I think, Katie, I'm cautious of big programs that start and just leave, and I'm not critiquing a big, smart program, but I feel if we're consistently doing something, even if it's small work, there's a credibility in the community knows who we are, there's trust, there's a trust factor. I absolutely know that the community trusts us as a ministry. So anyone who visits our community, if it's an American student or a German student or a British student, immediately the schools would also trust the students, because they know that we've earned the right to be heard. And I think I don't want to maybe overplay this, but I think when you ministering into a different culture group, there often is a sense that you have to earn the right to be heard, and it takes time. And I think the one thing that may have been problematic in the past, if I think of missional work in Africa, indigenous people have often felt like missionary programs come and they speak down to the people and they give them grand programs and then they exit. And so we've just had a heart not to tell them what we think we must do. So our whole philosophy in going to the schools is not one of saying, this is what we want to do. We've gone to every school where we work, and we work in 5 schools. We'd say, how can we best serve you? So every school looks a little different. In some schools, we involved in a feeding scheme. In another school, it may be helping with kids who struggle with reading. In another school, it may be their phys ed classes. But it's our whole philosophy of ministry is not, we're going to tell you what you need. We want to come and serve you. And I think the consistency in that is that students may change, because they obviously do, but there's already a credibility of who we are, because it's not like we've come in and we've left again.
And I think what you're describing is some of the most successful missionaries and ministry organizations that I've been able to see over the years that are the most successful and have the most impact are the ones who come in and either they're an outside agency that comes in, but they work with Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And they give the reins over to them. They may provide training, they may provide funding or equipment or something like that, but the whole time their whole goal is to be able to turn this over to them and let them run it, because they're the ones that have the most knowledge about the area and the culture and all those kinds of things. And so instead of just coming in and, trying to do things the way that you think that it should be done as.
So we do have Indigenous leadership. We've always had local people that we've trained and hand over to them. And sometimes it's a challenge, because I think it's probably best to say that every culture is different. And so maybe just one example would be when we're working with German volunteers and students, it's a very organized culture and it likes to put things in boxes. And in Africa, people aren't like that. There's a lot more spontaneity. And I always help them understand that we've got to come to the level of the people. It's not that one culture group is better than another culture group. We may be the ones who are initiating, but let's understand the context in which we work and serve them in their context. And I'm super sensitive to the fact that we don't come and tell them this is how it must be done. It sounds good and it's the right thing, but there are frustrations at times. And we'll often, as an example, we'll find that teachers in the community are not as committed to the kids as we think they should be. But that gives us the space again to show the kids that we really are committed to you. It's not just a program. So typically on a Friday night, we'd have students come to our farm, and we call it Girls' Night. It's mostly young teenage girls, and a simple thing like just inviting them into our home for a meal, which we do often. It's massive for them, because they may not say it, but they literally do see themselves as less than. And so it's just constant affirming and showing them that they're not less than, that before God, we all created in the image of God. And I always say, God didn't say He created the black man or the white man or the Hispanic or the Asian He created man in His image. And so we're very intentional to help them understand that you are God's creation, and I'm not better than you because of a skin color. So, yeah.
So I know with, you were mentioning you do different things at different schools. You do music with them, music and dancing. You do sports. You do, kind of vacation Bible school kind of activity type of things. Why do you do that kind of approach instead of just having them come and sit and teaching them about the
That's a
Bible?
good question. I'm a creative artist, but I've always thought that music is very attractive to any culture group. If you play music, kids come. So music has always been a big part of the appeal for young people to come to a program. They love music, they love to dance. But as an example, soccer is also big, but it also depends on who we have in the program at the time. Sometimes we've had, recently we had two German students who were both very serious soccer players. So that was such a gift to the kids because they could literally coach them, teach them soccer skills. And so in that season, soccer was a big part. And so I would say, Katie, our program isn't it is structured, but there's enough space for, in one season, there may be a greater emphasis on music. In another season, there may be a greater emphasis on soccer, but it's changing depending on the gifting that we have in terms of the students who work with us.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you bridge the connection from music and sports and all that to the gospel?
Well, the philosophy is that we'll always have a fun program. So whether it's soccer or music or a dance workshop or something like that, and then we always end it with a Bible story. And we've also introduced leadership principles. So we'll just have a leadership principle, something we've identified in the community, which we've spoken about a lot at this camp as well, is respect. So in this community, the kids we serve, they don't see respect modeled. They don't see parents talking to each other with respect. There's no honor. And so it's a value that we're constantly trying to reinstall or reinforce in them, learning to honor the next person. And so, yeah, there's always leadership principles. And I do, look, it's not an easy, I always say, I do believe culture can shift. So it doesn't matter what your context is. I'm a passionate believer that culture shifts, and I'm very passionate about Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the continuous renewal of your minds. And I've been in ministry, or rather we, my wife and I and our family, where we've literally seen radical change in people, where someone maybe as a grade 6 kid did not have any self-esteem or did not see him or herself. And then over time, we could see how they moved to a place of, I do have value. I can do something with my life. And you see the change in the people. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have somebody specific that you've seen from the community or from your program that has made a big life change, and then kind of what they're doing now?
Absolutely. Yes. There's he now works for us. So he's from the community. And so when I describe the situation, I would say it is a dysfunctional community because there's gender violence and a lot of physical and emotional abuse. And this particular young man, his mother literally just delivered him at his grandma. He was 3 months old, and his mom just brought him to his maternal grandmother and left him. So already that he didn't grow up with a father, his grandmother raised him. That already sets a pattern of like rejection, or why did my mom not want me? And when we started working with him, all the typical dysfunctions with their poor self-image, and often when kids have a poor self-image, they also display it in aggressive ways. It's easier to kick and fight than to choose love and nurture. But especially my wife in this particular young man's case, she's been very consistent in helping him understand that we see the potential in him. He has potential. And today he works for us. He's a chef in the lodge, and he's not only a chef, we say he's probably the most multitasked kind of a person, because he's brilliant in landscaping. He's great with guests. He does front of house. So he can do, in 1 week, he can be working in the kitchen as a chef, and the next day he could be front of house working with guests, and the next day he could be doing landscaping. And he loves the diversity, and he loves that. And I'll be honest, Katie, it's like there are times when he will fall back into almost like the thinking of, and I sometimes feel it's almost like a test to us, like, do you really care enough about me that if I should make a mistake, that you would still believe in me? And so in the beginning, there were hiccups, but now there's such a strong trust relationship, and we've seen literally someone just blossom. there's more than there's another girl who also works she's in our laundry, and she was also from a very dysfunctional background, and the same for her. And we often say they are probably our most loyal staff because they've literally come through the program, so to
Yeah.
speak. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you talked about the lodge. Tell us a little bit about the lodge where you live and work, and what the function of it is right now.
Yeah. Well, actually, Katie, it's kind of like a bittersweet situation. The lodge was built. The initial plan was that we would just have a guest house, a manor house, and the ministry is our main passion, and that the manor house or the guest house would be passive income, for the ministry. And then with our German funder and donor, the vision just got, or the dream to have this guest house just became bigger and bigger. And by the time it was finished, we ended up having a 5-star lodge. And we completed building operations just as COVID hit. So our first 2 years were just absolutely dismal, to start hospitality during COVID. So sadly, so a lot of energy had to then go into making this upmarket venue work. And at times we felt like it was more of a distraction than the blessing it is supposed to be. But we've come full circle to a place where, coupled with having a heart for marginalized youth, I've also always had a heart for broken people. And I've met so many Christians, especially missionaries, who really struggle with fatigue. Um, I've had this dream in my heart that we would minister to weary people. And so we now, obviously, we're still running it as a business, but we have we have a bigger dream that more and more the lodge will be a place where people can come and be restored. And so I would say there's a big part of our hearts that wants to see the lodge. There's the ministry to the kids, but the actual facility, the lodge, become more of a place of restoration for those who have been wounded and those who are just fatigued. It's just something it's the Isaiah 61 picture, to bind up brokenhearted, and there just are multitudes of people who've been on the mission field, who've served in missions, that are weary and hurt and tired and fatigued. And it may not necessarily relate to the mission field. We recently had a spiritual retreat for tired people, and two of our attendees were people who'd lost the one guy lost his wife about 6 months ago to cancer, so he's still in a deep place of grieving. And the one lady, she was her and her husband did missions in Turkey, and he died of cancer about a year ago, but she's still in the grieving process as well. And it feels like a joy that we could offer a safe space for them and I'll actually just tell you the story. The husband, on the first night of us sitting together, he said when his wife died, his brother's a pastor, and he was given so many scriptures of how to deal with his grieving. And he said that evening, he said, I so wish that I could have then had what I have to now, just people willing to listen and allow me to cry and just hold me and not necessarily give me an easy answer.
Right. That kind of that ministry of just presence and can be such a meaningful thing for people. So you really want to kind of flip the script on how you're doing the lodge now, where you're wanting to do primarily ministry through the lodge and then have it generate income. So you're in the middle of fundraising for that. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, as you know, you and your sister came to visit us. It was October last year, and we did some recording and telling the Khanyisa story, and we had to raise a significant amount of, I think it's 8 million South African rand, but I think in dollars it's probably about 400,000. and as a deposit, because we're in the process of purchasing the lodge, because the German landowner, the main funder, there's been a lot of change in his life, and he's been very gracious, kind, very supportive person, but he's wanting to hand over to us. And it's been quite intimidating to raise that kind of amount of money, but absolutely the visual tells a story. And we're not done yet. We've raised our deposit, but we're trying to raise the full amount so that we don't have this burden of the lodge must generate money. That we're trying to get to a place where we've raised enough capital that people can come and not have to pay. So the retreats that we have done now, we've offered them free, that people didn't pay. And we had an organization in America called Deeper Still Missions, and they very much believe in restoration and reaching out to people that are tired and weary, especially people who've been in missionary work. So they've already provided funding. But yes, absolutely, the visual goes a long way, and we're deeply grateful for what you've done for us, and I believe we'll continue to raise funds so that we can be at a place where we're not dependent on business as such in the
Right.
lodge. Yeah.
Right. And so what is appealing about having video and pictures and stuff like that? How does it, what can it communicate to people who may have never seen the lodge, may have never seen any of your ministry? How has that helped them connect to it?
I think, Katie, I mean, you're a creative person, so it's quite challenging for me to tell you, but I think pictures tell a story. When you see something, it's the same way music creates an emotion. Music can create joy, or it can create a sadness. And I think when people see pictures, and also when they hear the heart of whoever the visionary person is, that tells the story. And it's far better than in the old days when we used to write letters.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, it's very interesting for me. I'm 66. So many young people have said to me, we don't read newsletters anymore.
Right.
Because I've struggled a bit. Like I write these newsletters and I don't get a response from the people who've served there. And then one honest young German man said, "Hey, Uncle Rolf, we don't really read newsletters anymore. You must just make a little TikTok video or something."
Yeah, yeah. And so, we've seen a lot of ministries that maybe haven't had a big social media presence, when they can kind of lean into that. It's, we see a good bit of success, and it can be hard. And especially if you don't have the right kind of visuals, that's why we're so passionate about that.
We're also at that place now where we still have the commercial videos, so to speak, for the business side, which has been necessary. But we're already working towards that shifting. That when people hear Khanyisa or Khanyisa Mountain Lodge, that it would speak of ministry more than it speaks of just a place of upmarket leisure.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If one of your students was sitting here with you 20 years from now, what would you hope that they would have taken away from your ministry?
I always say to students when they serve there, when you're 18, 19 or 20, you can't imagine that when you're 60, you'll remember what you did when you're 18, 19 or 20. But I fully remember the people in my life that impacted me when I was a young Christian. Fully remembered. I can still visualize where we sat and when I heard a particular story. And I would hope that a student that served with us 20 years from now, when they look back and they say, I lived on a farm in Africa, and we saw lives change to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That would be my hope. That literally say, we saw lives changed by the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people get involved in your ministry?
For young people, it's an application process to come as a volunteer. and serve in the community. So that's what we rely on. We're very volunteer driven for the actual missions work. But just talking to the main speaker of this particular webinar, this camp, I just thought, like, someone like Josh could be at Khanyisa and we could run a leadership seminar.
Yeah.
So I'm so wide open, Katie, to what skills people bring, because in Africa we're not quite as I don't want to use the word sport, that sounds negative, but we're not as privileged as America is, and we have such a ripe mission field. There's so much need, and so the skills that you bring, if you could come to the lodge and run a seminar on social media,
Right.
literally, and that be a blessing to the ministry, help us get off the ground better. Or a friend of mine who Mike Demas, he's a sound engineer, and I said, trust me, you can come to South Africa for 6 weeks and do workshops on sound engineering. So there's so many ways, and we're also very intentional in being part of the community, the wider community. So we are very intentional and focused on working with local churches. And right now I've just started a project where I'm working with pastors from poor communities and the wealthier communities.
Oh, cool.
And bringing them together. And we call it like a safe space where on a Thursday morning we'll get together. And literally you're talking about pastors, some pastors who will have church in a tiny little shack, and then there may be a pastor from a church that's a beautiful historical big building. But for the body of Christ to come together and to grow together. So there's that as well. There's always an opportunity for us to be catalysts for change. And for a relationship like ours where you've invested in us, and I know you didn't have a great financial reward, but I hope that when you hear the stories of what's happening in the lives of kids, and with expectation in my heart, say what still will happen on the mountain, at Khanyisa Mountain Lodge, that would also be very fulfilling for anyone who sows into our ministry. I would really be sad if anyone who comes there to serve in whichever way leaves feeling I wasted my time.
Yeah.
But we've not had that. We've had most, if not all, of the young people who serve, they really leave very sad because it impacts their lives too. This is maybe just what I want to say in closing, Katie. It's very interesting that the young people who serve in the volunteer, like reaching out to the youth in our community, they come to minister, but I often feel they get ministered to more because it's life-changing for them to see poverty, to be part of kids being healed, kids' lives being changed. It actually impacts them as much, or sometimes even in a greater way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love you so much, and I'm so appreciative of you and taking your time to do this with us today.
Thank you so much, Katie, and you've been a huge blessing to us. You know that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. If you found this conversation helpful, take a second to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who would enjoy it. Until next time, keep looking for the stories that God is writing around you.